Hi Nihar, welcome to the session. We'll be
Hi,
starting
Nini.
shortly.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you.
So we were talking about the exam approach and how we should be attempting this paper, given that this paper typically, depending on the textbook that we follow, it could be anywhere between 700 to 900 word, 900 pages long. And in addition to that, we also um, have to attempt mock paper, past exam papers, scenarios, revision, so on and forth. We need to really adopt a smart technique to cover this entire syllabus and revise this as well. So the approach we are talking about is we should take is to spend sufficient time on the theory, but also spend a lot of time on attempting the scenario, case studies, etc. A and B, to expose ourselves to the exam papers at the earliest stage. It should not be left for the last 2 weeks of the study. We need to start testing how skillfully we are able to handle the exam papers at the earlier stage. So after every 2-3 class, we will try to attempt one mock paper or at least half of one exam paper or at least half of the exam paper, so that we can continue to test our progress as well and how we should be attempting these questions. So before jumping onto that on the classwork and coursework, basically I just want to highlight few of the techniques which is not only useful for the exam but also for overall study of the case, making the bullet points, summarize this, because it requires a different type of writing and reading skill as well, unlike what we do when we read any other textbook or novel. So in terms of the time management, when it comes to timing, it has 4 hours, right?
Yes.
240 minutes. When I was doing it was 3 hour 15 minutes, but and was really pressed. So, and then we have one large case studies also. From this case study, we'll have question number 1, 2, 3, and they will be testing some aspect of the SBL. For example, it could be testing the corporate governance. It could also test basic of the financial ratio or calculations. Different question will have different kind of approach to test our skill set. Some will require you to write a memo, right? So in this manner, there will be like 2 3 different questions, and then there will be sub questions as well. So you can easily expect that this 100 mark basically will have 7 to 8 different sub questions. Each sub question could assess you, test you on different questions, like some will be on SWOT or PESTEL, 5 forces, maybe corporate failures. So each topic might have 10 mark or 8 mark, etc. to assess you on. So the key is to handle and understand one large case study really well. Because once you have grasped this one, what is going on, and you can interconnect all the points, because various paragraphs, it could have 4 to 5 different para, and they will not be divorced from each other. They'll be all interlinked. It will be a large case study when the company is trying to go international, but they do not have the resource. But then after some time, the shareholders were given the proposal to acquire, to sell the shares, and the board of directors or the management do not want to sell their shares, because they know if the company is taken over by another competitor, they will be replaced. Such complex scenario will be given, and you can imagine that each paragraph of that scenario will be linked with each other. And when you answer all this question, you have to bear in mind that all points should be touched upon from the perspective of the SWOT or the PESTEL or the 5 forces or the corporate governance or the corporate failures. whenever you talk about one point, you need to consider all the hidden salient points and the features of the case. Now, as we have glorified the case studies already, what should be the strategy to read and write? First, you should spend almost 40 to 60 minutes. And remember, it is not wastage of time. 40 to 60 minutes on case study. Highlight each point as you find it relevant. Once you go through different models and exam pattern, you will be able to cherry pick and pick up the relevant points, such as maybe something for Porter's diamond, or how to do the risk management. Whenever you see some point, you will be able to spot them, right? You see that, oh, there is something relevant coming, and you will be able to highlight them. Use different colored marker, or if it is exam, then you can use different highlighters. Exam on computer, then you can use different type of highlighter as well to code them. You can also put some note in the side if you think it relates to diamond versus SWOT analysis, maybe stakeholder mapping. So you can put some keyword in the side, because when you are going through the typical question, suppose that question number 4, you will be able to quickly scan through and find out that, okay, what were the points that related to that was related to the failure of the corporate governance. If you have that approach, you'll be able to quickly pick up the relevant points on the case studies, and you don't have to go through 6 times again throughout the case study if you have done the proper marking. So proper marking is key and critical. Why I'm telling you all this before starting the discussion and the study of this subject is because we will be practicing these tools and techniques on the day 1. We don't need to wait for this when exam or the mock papers are attempted. Just give me a second. Battery was dying. All right. So that should be the strategy to attempt the case study. So after 40 to 60 minutes that we have spent, how much time we are left with? 180 minutes. Okay. How to use this? Now let's talk about resource wise. We have 180 minutes, and how much score we are with? 80 marks, right? Because 20 marks is for professional scores, yeah, or professional marks. What does that mean is, how do you present your communication and flow? Are all your points interlinked? Do you put forward your point like a flowing river? Are they connected to each other? Are they connected? So you need to pay attention to all such critical points, even right selection of the words. So vocabulary can also play a critical role. So 20 marks are allocated to your professional writing skill. Right. That's why I say that when you're trying to achieve this 80 mark, the 20 mark will be not on the basis of the content, it will be on the basis of how do you write each and every point. So really, this 180 mark, 180 minutes will be there to achieve only 80 marks, because 20 is just on your presentation and writing skill. So essentially, you are expected to spend almost 2.5, 2.6 minutes each mark. That should be your another benchmark when you're writing the answers. Okay, so try to spend maybe on average 2 minutes so that you have some spare time at the end. If you see a 10-mark question, then have some 20 or 22 minutes booked for that, and accordingly attempt the questions. Even if you're doing that in your practice session at home or anywhere, you need to get into that habit. If you're not able to complete all these 10 marks in this time frame, just move on. Write down all the bullet points and try to switch to another question. Any questions so far or any doubt?
No, sir.
Okay. Few other writing skill that is essential, and despite knowing the models in great detail, often students are penalized because of not paying attention to these critical exam techniques or even reading techniques. And what are they? Let me just make a sequence of at least one of your question will require you to write a memo or report. Then there will be at least one question which will ask you to make a strategy, maybe to go global or to launch a new product. Generally, it is suggested that we follow some methodology and approach, whether it is STAR technique, is STAR, like what was the situation and what was the task, what is the action required, and what results are expected. Or you can follow something like this, especially in case of memo or report. Because once you follow this approach, A, your focus will be there. You'll be always focused and looking for the key points. And B, even if you miss something, you will know that you have not covered all the points, and you will be always brief, focused, and concise, which will get you a lot of professional marks. And remember, this 20 mark is for professional writing, and it can make a hell lot of difference between the passing and failing. Because somebody who has only scored on the basis of the technical understanding, right? Your technical understanding means knowing well all the all the different models and how to apply those models in a business situation, your business acumen, understanding, that is all about 80 mark. So that will go bring you up to 80 mark. And maybe if you are able to only score 35 out of 80, you are likely to fail. But if you are strong in the professional writing, you can easily fetch 15 marks here and you can pass. This is a magic number. So this 20 is a matter of practice, professional writing, and it can make a major difference between passing and failing. How to achieve that? Some of the easy ways. So when you write a memo, you need to define and bear in mind what is your role. You should not take a general perspective that, okay, generally we think people should be doing this. There should not be a general comment. Define your role both in your mind and in writing, that your role is such and such, and you are writing a memo to this person as a project manager or a strategic advisor or consultant. Then keep in mind what the format is needed. Format and report structure. Thirdly, who are audience? Because that will decide whether you go into the details or high level. And what should be the language as well. Thirdly, mark allocation. How much mark this question or this portion carries. That needs to be kept in mind. Professional language, should not use check and will find out, etc. Say will investigate, or and use the word and the language we should be more strategic in nature. And finally, don't forget to link as many model or the framework as possible and write a sentence about that model as well. So if you think there are like 1, 2, 3 different models which you can align in your explanations, right? Maybe one model for Porter, one for corporate governance, another one for maybe financial analysis. Try to mention as many models and the business tools and techniques. Put a line for that, one sentence, try to explain that, and then back up your answer with the facts, figures, numbers, and the models. These are some of the winning techniques that examiners are looking for in any answer. And it should not be practiced end of February or first week of March. That should be starting from now on, because then you'll take almost 2 months to master all these strategies. Is that all good?
Sir, can you re-explain STAR and the memo thing?
Star and memo, right?
Yeah, what's the link? Like, how do you approach?
Oh, okay. So STAR is basically when you're writing a report or somebody has given you international expansion scenario. For example, somebody said that you are the business head of one of the edtech in India called Harappa or something like this. You need to internationalize, but you know that there is no international brand visibility of your product, and it is very hard to collaborate globally because no one knows you outside. Now, you need, as a business head of this technology company or education company, you need to define your strategy and approach, right? So that problem is given to you. After reading, suppose 1 or 2 page of case study, right? You might be thinking in the exam that, okay, where to start from? There's so many thoughts coming to your mind and so many doubts and the questions. So for that situation, this STAR technique is useful because it will just help you focus. So how to start? You need to start with the situation. You can say, I'm a business consultant or the head of the business of this technology firm. The situation is that the company has grown tremendously in India and is eyeing to grow internationally given its advantage in the teaching using technology. The challenge is that there is no collaboration available for this company because this company has no brand visibility outside India, and it does not have deep pocket to spend on takeover, merger, or joint venture. So this is a problem, right? So you have defined the situation. Task. Your task as a consultant is to, then you can provide all the goals, objective, your task, company's objective, how long you want to, what is your time limit to achieve all the tasks. And then you can say, what is the suggested action, basically. And this is where you'll apply all the model, tools, technique, etc. That will be action. And then you'll see that, okay, what results to expect and how would you keep measuring, monitoring, and controlling the action that is suggested or the action plan. So you will put a couple of bullet points here. How would you control and monitor the situation after you suggest something to be done? So STAR. So this kind of model, if you follow, it will give you a framework to write up, and it will not, let you go back and forth. Sometimes when we write without a model, we go back and forth. We write a little bit about the situation, then task and action, and again we start to talk about situation and task, and then we talk about the results. With so these things easily start to happen when we don't follow a structure to write.
Yes, sir.
In memo, we go in a different way. This becomes more formal, and it is addressed generally to the board of director or the CEO, and you are a consultant and head of business development. So you say to the board of directors or the chairman, if this is regarding the expansion of the business, your role is as a head of business development or the consultant, and then you will talk about the what is the problem statement. And again, you can follow this structure like STAR. Who are So you can talk about the column, what is the situation, what is your suggestions, and while you write about all these star S, T, A, and R, you can bear in mind these 3 points anyway. And what are they? Who are your audience? You need to keep in mind that you're talking to the board of directors and the CEO. No need to go into the basics, but you need to talk about the visions, the goal, objective, returns, return on investment, return on efforts, all those kind of things. And keep in mind the mark allocation. We should not spend too much time as well while going into the depth. Sometimes when students really love the topic and like the question, they keep going elaborating that and well beyond the time. So that is something to keep in mind. And finally, the professional write-up. All points should flow in a way that readers don't have to go back and forth to understand what you're trying to say. It should be a very smooth flow that attracts a lot of good marks, and it goes beyond 20 actually, because when you are writing very nicely and professionally, it will also sound that you are very logical, right? So even on the 80 marks side, you'll gain more score if you're writing professionally, and of course professional marks will be attracted anyway. So this is a very important skill to develop gradually in next 2 months. Okay, so now we can move to the textbook. Just open it. Can you see the book now?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So again, a typical definition. What is leadership? Johnson et al. Is the book that is often quoted for such definition. But surely this is nothing new. When it comes to the definition, is a process of influencing an organization in its efforts towards achieving an aim or goal. If you have any other definition of leadership, that will also do. And not necessarily that in order to achieve mark, you need to quote only Johnson. This really require you to define the leadership from any organizational perspective. You can talk about some aspect of the leaders like visionary leadership, aspiring leadership, inspirational leadership, charismatic leadership. There are different types and aspects of the good leadership as well. So structure is important, the definition and the content is not, because leadership definition can be 4 or 5 different types of leadership. And when it comes to leadership definition, what you think a leader possess? They are visionary. They are change maker. They inspire. They see the future. Right? So they are futuristic. There are hundreds of different traits, and it cannot be really defined in one paragraph or one statement. Yes, you can pick up 2 or 3 different traits and explain that one. And why I'm telling you this, because book to book, the definition can change, but it will help you to remember what to write when you know the overall approach. There's no hard and fast definition on leadership. Of course, ethics or even integrity is fundamental to good leadership, because then it will generate trust, right? Trust propels people in the vision, right? People to work towards the vision. So it is important that leader have ethics and integrity, which will bring trust, and people will be focused towards the objective and the vision of the leader. Otherwise, if people don't like the leader, they don't share the vision, and they don't trust them, then there's no point and there's no chance they will be focused and motivated to work on the vision of that leader. So that kind of relationship should be kept in mind when defining the leadership and their traits, and why those traits are important. The question can come up like that as well. It may not be fixed in this format. It can change. So now think of 3 people you consider effective leaders, past or present. So historically, who are your role model leaders in the past, present, or any time? Of course, we don't know about the future, but past and present, what were the best leaders? What kind of quality they possessed? What happened with these qualities? What results were coming out of these qualities? So you need to talk about those. Again, these are really creative writing skill set, right? Suddenly, if this question comes, it should not make you nervous. You can just start to look for this kind of words, this kind of personality and content when you are reading any book, any blog. So that's why it is important to now develop a habit to read books, blogs, even website, surfing, LinkedIn, even FB post. They all are full with this kind of content, which can provide you some information about the great leaders, their past, present, their work, etc. And it's not necessarily found only in the textbooks. Do you want me to give an example? So some people will call, Nelson Mandela or Gandhi. Some people will call, some will talk about Dr. Kalam or Netaji Bose, right? And what were their key characteristics? What was the strength of their personality? Some will even talk about Vikram Sarabhai, like people who established the foundation stone of scientific progress in India. What was their strength? How did they motivate people? How did they inspire people? Those are the traits that you need to talk about. Trait theories, the qualities possessed by good leaders. Same thing as above. So research in the first part of 20th century tended to assume that natural leaders possessed traits that others did not, such as energy, intuition, and persuasiveness. However, all these research failed to identify a set of traits that would guarantee success in leadership. Now, many leadership theories are saying that there is nothing like innate or natural leaders. There's nothing like a natural leader which can make somebody a leader or not. This is a quality which can be developed. So the new theory say leaders are developed. Why? Because earlier there was and the route to believe this is that earlier people believed that leaders have certain innate talent. Maybe they look intelligent at least, or there are some very subjective traits as well of leaders. They look very tall, or they talk smartly, or persuasively? But then we can argue, and I'm throwing all these aspects so that your argument is much more kind of practical and business driven. You can say that these were the traits which were defined about a leader in the past. Maybe a great communication skill or great communicator. But all these definitions are not really effective because there could be certain leaders who do not fit in any of this traditional setup or getup. Do you agree? You make a list of 100 traits of leaders, okay? And I can find out 100th trait of a person, and you'll agree that this person was also a leader in some way, right? So there's no exhaustive list of the traits that the leader can have, but yes, somebody who can make things better or improve the existing situation can become a leader, and it can have just a different trait. That also means that the traditional approach that leaders are born with certain traits may not be correct, because those traits can be developed in the lifetime. So what are the power influence approach? This explains the leadership effectiveness in terms of the amount and type of power possessed by leaders. So another traditional definition and the approach that came from that leaders means power, right? So leadership can be exercised in a way that is autocratic or a participative and subordinative. And subordinates exercise more decision making and autonomy. So leadership, when it is a power based definition, it is of two types. One is autocratic, and second can be participative. What is the difference? They are kind of opposite to each other. Autocratic takes the decision and tell their team what to do. Participative will ask, discuss, and advise them what to do. So this is more democratic. This is more autocratic. Situational approach. So there is one power is one approach to define leadership. Then second approach is situational. It is also in the modern textbook called situational leadership. Have you heard of it? Situational leadership.
Yes, sir.
So what it talks about is that there is no one way or one leader in the organization, or there is no one style of leadership. And this situational leadership, it is a kind of a new type of definition for the leadership literature. It says that everyone is a leader in a different situation, and it is quite true. A technology leader will keep silent in a meeting which is all about the new product or marketing initiative, and maybe a new analyst which has entered into the office, they will be talking more about what the company should be doing. So situation to situation, there will be new leaders, or maybe a senior global leader should remain silent when the juniors are taking the lead. And the situation leadership says that, okay, your job is to create more leaders, and your succession planning should be strong, and you should not always be in the lead position. Not taking the lead is also a leadership approach. So that is situational leadership, and it is all about the contingency. Like situation to situation, your approach has to vary. There's no one size fits all approach for the situational leadership or situational approach. You have to keep trying new way of achieving the results, building your team and the organization. So effectiveness of a certain type of leadership may depend on the characteristics of followers, nature of the work performed, type of organization, and external environment. So that is contingency theory. Leadership roles. Johnson et al. Identify a number of key roles in strategic leadership. So not only basically as per Johnson et al. There could be other theory that you would have studied in the past. Do you remember Anthony's model?
No, sir.
And so this is called Anthony model, and it is just to help you understand that this section is talking about where the leaders sit and where the leaders are found. Okay, so it's saying identify a number of key roles in strategic leadership. So what is the position, what is the role of the leaders in the strategy? So Anthony model was another popular model in the strategy textbook, which talks about there are three layers of organization or the leaders. One is strategic. Let me write here. This layer is strategic. This one is, second one is tactical. And third is operational. Oops. Writing. So this is operational. So there are three layers of any organization: strategic, tactical, and operational. At all three levels, you will find the different types of leaders. So that means leaders can be found at either of these three layers. Okay, so once you keep this in mind, Anthony's model, and in fact, you can also refer to this one in your answer. More and more type of models and the theory you build and integrate, it will be helpful. So this is a good way to remember that there will be some leader at the top level who are the strategic level, and some will be at middle managers, and the middle management can also include the operational leaders. So you can call these two as the middle management. This is the top management. What will they do? Just go by the name, or just visualize any organization and imagine that it has three layers: strategy, tactical, and operational. So today, if Reliance Group is trying to bring maybe 5G or 6G, what will they be doing? They'll talk about the cost, the strategy, the license, the market, what will be the return, so ROI, the cost, legal aspect, market, okay, long-term benefit, what kind of data that will be generated if they go into this business, 6G or 7G. So envisioning, and that's what at the strategic level, that's what we do. We never live. When we talk about the strategy, we don't live in present, we live in future. Recently, Elon Musk, in one of the interview, he said, when people come and congratulate me for any decision or any business model we adopted, I just think in my mind that I took that decision 3 years ago, for which people are congratulating me today, right? It's a great indicator that how the global leaders and the strategic leaders work. They are always 3 to 5 years forward. So envisioning future strategy, alignment. At their level, they need to align not only their team, but also tactical team and operational team, right? Because their vision should be flowing through all the level down. So alignment and embodying change. So they need to play the role model as well. This is more kind of a very theoretical way of thinking, that when any senior banker started the bank, or Tata Group started, GRD Tata was, behaving like in this manner, and that set the tone of the entire organization. That is embodying change. So they need to become the role model, the story and symbol of how the corporate should behave. What kind of ethics? You remember we talked about the ethics earlier? They are the ones who brings ethics in the organization. If the top is not ethical and do not communicate with integrity, it will flow throughout the layers up to the bottom. So they need to embody the change. They need to walk the talk. Anyway, so that's 3 layers, a couple of bullet points for top managers, how they need to behave, what kind of activity and action they have. Then comes middle managers. They are, since if you apply, it will help to remember the task of middle managers if you keep in mind the Anthony's model as well. So they need to apply the strategy made by the global leaders or their top team. So top team has decided that we need to implement 6G. Now the tactical team, which is like directors, VPs of the different functions, head of finance, they are tactical people. They will talk about how to implement, where to get the cost, and how to get the legal license, and all those kind of details they will go into. Of course, they are still senior enough to go into the day-to-day execution, but they will make actual plan to implement the strategy set at the top. So tactical people will make the plan. Now, to do that, they have to act like an advisors to senior management. They have to sense making of a strategy, means they are the ones who will say, hey, Mr. Ambani, going to 6G and 7G does not make sense, because though you will have great technology implemented across the country, you will have a legacy, but your return will be very thin because people are not really ready and willing to pay or use 6G. It is impractical. And then the strategy team will say, yeah, you make sense actually. So what is the role of tactical? To make sense. So they will rationalize the strategy. They will make sense of the strategy and then act like an advisor to senior management, because they still have a lot of experience and expertise. That's why they are at the technical level in the middle management. Reinterpretation and adjustment to strategy as per circumstances, because they need to tactically handle the strategy. So they need to calibrate the strategy. They need to make the changes where appropriate and adopt the strategy, maybe based on situations, circumstances, the requirement of the society, the local society, state, provinces. They need to adapt the strategy. Okay, because strategy team will not have the time to do all these things. Operational team will be looking for the guidance from the senior. They don't have that much expertise. So it is the role of tactical team. And of course, local leadership of changes. Finally, change and leadership. Generally, the leadership team are also in charge of change. That's why they are called change agents. They are the ones who drive the change. Of course, in the modern management books, it is called that everyone is a change agent. Everyone can bring the change. But given the authority, power, and the roles, it is the leadership team which most often drive the change. So they are change agents. Change agency, everything associated with making change happen. Okay, so just change the word from agent to agency. So that's what it is. And finally, a different bifurcation of the leadership style is charismatic versus transactional. In fact, when you Google just the leadership style, you will find millions of pages talking about the different types and styles of leadership, and the list can go on and on. There are various other splits as well, but important to remember this one: charismatic versus transactionals. Tell me that when you hear the videos of, say, Steve Jobs or Dr. Kalam or Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, if you're a scientist, right? Or when you hear the video of John F. Kennedy, right? What kind of feeling comes to the mind? You feel that, yeah, you also can do a lot of things. You should aspire to change so many different things, and you should try to grow in your life, etc. So that kind of feeling that comes to your mind after listening to these leaders is trait of a charismatic leader. So those are the charismatic leader, because the first indicator of the charisma is when people listen to them, they get charged, they get positively electrocuted, they get lots of energy and inspiration. So that's charismatic leader. They are not forcing you to do anything. They are not bullying you to do anything. They are not showing power, authority, or autocracy. They are just inspiring you when you listen to them. Then opposite to that is another approach of leadership, actually this way, opposite to that is transactional leader. Okay, who are they? Any example of transactional leader? Have you met one ever? No, you have only met charismatic leaders. You don't have to give the name. They will come to you and will give you a list of tasks A, B, C, D, and it will have an ETA as well. The ETA will be good enough, tight enough. Okay, 10th January, 15th January, 20th January, and 28th. That's it. No discussion. Phone hang up. Does it ring a bell? So what they talk about? They talk about the transactions, objective, goal, a very kind of task-driven approach. Nothing to inspire, nothing to change, nothing to motivate, nothing else. Okay. So this is called transactional or instrumental leadership because it deals with the transactions only. You just complete A, B, C, D, da, 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 and done. That is their leadership style. In given case history, you might be asked to identify different type of traits and the leadership styles. That's where this type of things will be relevant and important. Then comes change management style. Generally, if you look for what are the different change management steps, what comes to the mind? A, there has to be communication about change. There should be logic and reasons given. There should be benefit communicated. There should be fourth number of vision, that if we do this, what will we get? And it will try to motivate everyone. So the credit goes to all. That's what it says. There are various textbooks on how to manage change, and you will see that the change management steps are like a good communication, collaboration, talk about the benefit, visions, credit goes to all, and it is kind of a team effort. That's what a good change manager, change agent that we talked about earlier talks about. Now, if you consider that these are the standard steps of change management, then all this will become very easy. Education and communication, right? You need to communicate and educate people why something needs to change. We see now the national education plan. We also see new acts coming regularly. We see the need to do new courses like ACCA. We also we see the need for the AI. All these kind of changes start with education and communication. If people don't understand, they are not educated, they will not accept it. Maybe when we see loads of new acts and the rules coming and some people start protesting, deep down somewhere in the psychology you will know that it is lack of education about the new act or the change, because of which basically people are protesting, they are not accepting it. So education and communication is important. Collaboration and participation. When you work with people and make them part of your efforts, they will collaborate and participate more, right? So if you work with them, there will be more participation, there will be more engagement. That is also called engagement. It's not about marriage, it's about keeping people together, involve everyone. And one of the definition of the leadership is to keep everyone together, to work with people and walk with people. So you need to bring everyone together on one single platform and communicate. Intervention. You can't just leave things flow on its own. You need to time see the deviation, also called control. Okay. So you need to control the process and the situation. If things are not going as per the plan, plan breached, you need to sit on the driving seat. Direction, again, intervention will be based on the direction, because if something is not going in the right direction, then you need to intervene. And coercion, in case something is not working at all. And imagine the situation like a military. When there is a panic, what the major or the captain do? They just give the order. They will not discuss that time. They'll just say that, okay, just do it. So that kind of situation might be required when managing the change. Coercion. Of course, it is not the best strategy to start with. It should be the last resort. When nothing else works, then coercion should be the strategy. Professional skill focus. Here comes the case study. Let's go through. Typically, what I advise before starting any case study, go through the requirements, because you have to otherwise read it 2-3 times anyway. Analyze. Sully Troon. Look like this person is a leader in the organization. Leadership style before and immediately after the training course. Okay, it seems that there was some problem with their leadership style and was sent on a leadership style training. So we need to analyze before and after situation. What happened before and after the course, right? And explain why the change of leadership style at ARC was unsuccessful. Oh, explain why the change of leadership style at ARC was unsuccessful. It seems that still the leadership style was not changed. The effort was unsuccessful. So 12 mark for the content, 2 mark for professional skill that we have talked at the start of the discussion, right? We discussed this at length. So 2 marks here out of 14, 1 by 7, almost 15 to 16% here allocated to professional skill. Okay, let's go back and find out about the leadership style changes, the courses which was conducted, and what has happened ultimately. You work as a consultant. You have been approached by Sully Troon, who is keen for some advice about how he should be leading his organization. Sully Troon has formed the Academic Recycling Company to offer a specialized waste recycling service. So it is important. He started this firm 10 years ago. The company has been very successful and expanded rapidly. Wow. So normally when entrepreneurs start a business at a small scale and it grows tremendously, they need to cope up with the new business model and the change situation. So that could be a challenge for Sully. Sully had implemented a tight admin process for operating and monitoring contracts. Okay. So Sully has sole responsibility. This is important for obtaining and establishing recycling contract. He has closely defined what needs to be done for each contract and how this should be monitored. Wow, see this one. He believes that workers in this country are naturally lazy and lack initiative. So he is quite subjective and biased as well, right? Some of the employee has complained about his autocratic style of leadership. And most of those who believe he is autocratic has already left the organization. So did you get the idea? How was he before the course? Pre-course behavior. And can you relate this to here before? Yeah. Now that's the benefit of reading the question and highlighting the key points. Now you can point out what you are looking for. Let's continue reading. So he went to a training course provider which promotes democratic style of management. Listing problems with contract. While he was attending the course, he had to deal with emails from the contract office listing problems with contract and asking him what action they should take. Okay, so there's no succession plan. Apparently there's no backup. No succession planning. Anyway, he became exasperated by the employee inability to take action to resolve these issues because he never groomed anyone. It's not highlighting. The second last paragraph is going to be very important. On his return from the course, Sully called a staff meeting with the contract office and said, now on, employee would have responsibility for taking control actions themselves. Okay. Change in behavior. Rather than referring the problem to him, Sully in turn was to focus on gaining more contract and setting them up. Okay. So more leadership role for Sully. Problem, okay, with the new arrangement arose very quickly. Okay. So what does this reflect? Again, a very undemocratic style, fearful of making mistake and unsure about what they were doing. So they were kind of the situation was still undemocratic.
So there was no guidance from the leader on what to do.
Yeah, so we have seen this in one of the suggestion earlier. Communication, right? Communication is important. Communication and education, right?
Yes, sir. Communication and education.
And education, because that was one of the terminology which was used earlier, and it was not given. They were just handed over the task. He is like a taskmaster. Another way you can look at this, what kind of leadership style he had? It is not charismatic, it is transactional, right? He just wanted the task to be done rather than motivating people and asking them, can they do this? One commented that before we got a clear decision very quickly, now decision can take several days and appear to lack authority. The new approach also caused tension and stress within the contract officers and absenteeism increased. Wow. All right. So in a way, you see here, there's a change in the organization, but mismanaged. Why it was mismanaged? Because change management was not properly done. And that was because A, communication and education was missing. B, training should have been there. Third, backup should have been created. Somebody senior should have been given also the role to look after this in his absence. And four, there should be some support and openness also. And in that regard, there was all these change management steps which was missing. At the next staff meeting, employees in the contract offices asked Sully to return to his old management style and job responsibilities because the change he was wanting to implement was not properly handled. We prefer the old Sully tune, they said. The training course has spoiled you. Oh. Reluctantly, Sully agreed to their request, and so all the problems are again referred up to him. And however, he is unhappy with this return to his previous way of working because he wanted to change the way, but he did not manage it properly. So people came back to him saying that, okay, we want old Sully, not because they like the old Sully, but that was the only option. He is working long hours and concerned about his health. And also he realizes that he has little time for obtaining and planning contract. So leadership role is again endangered. He's and severely restricting the capacity of the company to expand. Yes, his leadership role is endangered now. He cannot focus on more important stuff. All right, and explain why the change of leadership style at ARC was unsuccessful. So we have got this answer as well. Why the change of leadership style at ARC was unsuccessful. Okay, now we will endeavor to write a short memo. Or are you fine to move on? Because we have identified some key issues. Let me just put a couple of bullet points at least.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sir, are all autocratic leaders transactional leaders, or they can also be transformational or charismatic? Yeah.
See, all the autocratic leaders are not transactional. They can be charismatic as well. These are mutually exclusive behaviors. What I mean by that is somebody can be completely autocratic but still can be charismatic. If you agree with this statement, I will give you an example. Let me repeat. One can be autocratic but still can be charismatic. Do you agree with this? And let me go back. Let me go back to Steve Jobs' style. And that's where I said that we need to reflect a lot on the business case, business situation to understand this paper well. Otherwise, it will become a disastrously dry. So Steve Jobs, how he used to behave. If you have read his the articles and the books on him, he would come to a meeting and will ask you. Let me just scribble a couple of points like this. Will ask you to design a mobile which is 70% slimmer. Okay. Now, as an engineer, you will think the resignation, the first thing, because it is unrealistic. It is too much to suddenly reduce. And he'll not give you room to disagree. It has to be done my way or highway. So people will start putting the effort. They will do 40% slimming, 50% of the slimming, and then you come up with a model and he will throw the mobile into the water tank or aquarium, and he will say, see, so many bubbles are coming out. That means you still have enough space left in this mobile model. You need to make it slimmer, better. This is not what we need. This is not how Apple works. So the problem with that is many people will find it quite autocratic. He's not asking you anything. He's just saying that this is how you need to do. But on the same time, once you start to move in the direction he is going, right, and you start to make the progress, you'll find charisma as well, because what he's saying also has some logic and rational, right? He does not just end his discussion after giving you the command. He will still work with you, but he will not give you much room for discussion, and he will not he will not be democratic. He will be just giving you the direction. But some of this direction can be completely mesmerizing, can be inspirational as well.
Yes, sir. True.
Right. So that kind of behavior can come from some very autocratic leaders. On the same time, some can be non-autocratic, non-completely democratic, while still giving the charisma. Like I said earlier, John F. Kennedy, when he talked about the mission to moon in 1962, he put through all the details of how a man can land there, and he talked about all the details, and he also said that how he will finance the entire project. And those who heard it, they were mesmerized, and they were kind of inspired by his charisma. So, all right, let me put a couple of bullet points to summarize the requirement, and then it will be just a matter of just so one thing that we found to start with before. One, he was autocratic. People quoted it. We can just quote the facts. People quoted it and left the organization. Second, it was causing people to leave, attrition, right? And drain on the skill sets. If your experienced people are leaving, your organization will be devoid of the skill sets. It will lack motivation. Also, it was eating up his time. Most of Sully time was wasted on admin things. It was style during the startup 10 years ago. Well, I have just noted down this point from my memory as I was going through, but you can just check again, because this section relates to all his style before the training program, and that's what we are asking here. So what are the key points I noted 10 years ago? So prima facie I can say that the 10 years ago he needed that style to form this company, but time has changed. With expansion of the business, he need to change his style. He cannot remain a 10-year-old Sully. He need to evolve as well with the business. His business has expanded, but he has not changed his style. Second thing, we have already noted autocratic style. People have already mentioned. People are leaving because of that, and he is his style is very demotivating, because somewhere people will note, right? If he thinks he does not believe in his people, right? He does not believe in people and find them inherently lazy.
So can we say that his leadership lacks social traits?
Um, there's no
Social traits such as cooperation uh, and courtesy, I would say.
yeah, you're right in saying that his leadership style lacks some of the emotional intelligence or the social trait, but then has to justify, and you can then justify like this. Let me add point number 8: lacking maybe emotional intelligence or social traits, as you said. He needs to know his people better, right? Probably he does not know people better, and he's just forming the stereotype idea about his employees.
He doesn't trust his employees.
Exactly. And where it comes from generally, the same word, the same people. If you go into the Microsoft and the Google and the Facebook and the Apple, they will have their different opinion about the people. If you go to any other organization like this, they will have different opinion. So it is all about the leadership style. He needs to know his people better, interact with them. Right, stop. Anyway, so lacking emotional or social traits, so he needs to know his people better, interact with them, and he is developing stereotypes, which is causing distrust, and he's not able to delegate the work. Okay, so another thing I would like to write, the problem is, why sometimes it stops writing as if there is a end of space. Okay, so the delegation is also important, which he needs to develop.
So the accountability and responsibility, the structure of the organization is not clearly defined.
Accountability before is clear. We are at the level
Okay,
before the
before you
course.
could. Yeah,
Yeah, before it is clear that
yeah.
he is one man army. And that's where the problem is. He needs to learn delegation better. Okay. But let me just yeah, switch to PPT. That will probably work much better. New share. So we are done with the before scenario, right? Now we will talk about what happened after and why it failed afterwards. Because there is a deeper problem even afterward, after he completed the training. So the question is that before and immediately after the training course, and explain why the change of leadership style at ARC was unsuccessful. An explanation would be, are you able to see a PPT? Blank PPT?
Yes, sir.
Okay. After the training, I think it was a bigger disaster. So he changed the role and delegated the work to his staff. Two, so what about the change? Just to refresh, change in business, more change in behavior. Okay, but people were fearful of making mistakes and unsure about what they were doing. So it was still very undemocratic. People were not open to talk to him. So communication line were not open, right? Communication channel was still not open, right? Otherwise, people could have just discussed with him openly that, hey, we are not confident of what we are doing, and we might make mistake. Proper communication about the roles and responsibility, right? He might be thinking that people can come to him, right? He might be thinking that people will come to my office and my cabin and will discuss about the problems. But how people will know if you don't tell them? Proper communication and education was missing. On R&R, roles and responsibility. Next, he should have also provided some training on how to write up the contract and decide these things. And there's no evidence that he provided any training. Quite surprising. As a CEO, he was doing this for 10 years, and now he wants everyone to do it by magic. Training to do the work missing. Right? Was he checking whether people are doing well or not? You remember there was one requirement for the change management earlier here. Let's refer. Change style, change agency. What were the steps? See, intervention and the direction. Is he checking whether people are doing well or not? No.
No.
No intervention. No control. And kind of checking on the progress. It is like fire and forget approach. Still, his behavior is assumption driven, right? He was assumption driven at the start and still in the same mode. He's using the coercion though at the end, but is escaping all other previous steps for the change management. So analyze his leadership style before and immediately after the training course and explain why the change of leadership style was unsuccessful. So this is done before and after. Now let's have a third PPT just to have a clean slate. And why change failed?
So he did not address the resistance of employees, like why they are.
But resistance of the employee was lack of his understanding. The people were not resisting. Oh, so you're saying basically that why people are not willing to do the contracts, right?
Yes, sir, because there was no motivation. So
Right.
that's why they were resisting and they left the organization.
So that will be so the way I want to frame this. I want to say that, okay, the change failed because you did not do the following 4 things, and then I will use this as a evidence. So this is not the kind of this is the root cause rather than the symptoms. Okay, symptom and the key issues are that he did not educate and communicate. That is one thing which is required for the change management program.
So we mentioned this point already in the above answer. It's like repeating the point.
Yeah, but here we are saying that what he did not do well after the training program, but then we are saying that the change of leadership style was unsuccessful basically. So we have to repeat anyway most of the point because he was still assumption driven, because the change program requires you to educate, delegate, communicate, collaborate, right? So he was missing this after the training program, and we have to highlight, maybe we just need to put a couple of more evidence here. because these are the ingredients of the change management program anyway. See here, this is middle management, change agency, education and communication, collaboration and participation. This is the requirement for the change management style. Earlier, we were talking about his behavior and the traits, which was not encouraging communication and education. But here, because he failed on all those 4 or 5 points, and we'll provide some of the evidence that why we think he failed on education and communication. Because apart from this, there are not going to be any new point anyway. And we can be just very specific rather than long point, because somewhere, yeah, there will be repetition, but that is the uh, framework for any change management program. So educate and communicate. What he did is he straight away handed over the responsibility. Did not communicate his vision. His vision. People did not believe why it is being done. Right? For any change to happen, shouldn't people know why it is being done? One thing is given, that he wanted to focus his time on business expansion, but was that communicated? Or where people consulted even?
No, sir.
And without consulting, if the role is handed over, one might just think that, okay, it is just another his autocratic way of behaving, and people will not be motivated to push the agenda. So that's one thing. And what else you want to add in terms of the communication? Let's refer to this. Communication and education done, training done, backup and support. So for such change to happen, there should be
So there should be incentives to motivate the employees so that if they do the task correctly, they would get so and so perks and benefits.
yeah that so yeah, these are the fundamentals of the change management. So incentivize the behavior, right behavior. Right behavior. What was the goal communicated? Setting goals and objective. Was there any organizational goals set out and people were told about the goals to achieve? This kind of things are needed. This is a very small case study where we might not think through that, okay, why these things are needed, but any large change management program that requires this kind of discussions. Set the goal and objective. Your performance goal should be reflective of the organizational goal, right? These things were discussed probably in papers such as performance management. Those becomes relevant here as well. And the benefit of change program, that is another thing that we discussed earlier, that benefit of change should be also communicated and discussed. So all these fundamental criteria for establishing and driving the change were missed by Sully, and because of that, it did not succeed. Okay, so everything that we have just written in these 3-4 pages and the slides, we can just elaborate this as a point. And remember the 2 mark, which is for the professional skills. And there you're writing grammatical structure, the vocabulary, everything would be considered in the answer.
So what do we do in analysis as a professional skill? Exactly.
Analysis means?
Like in the question they're asking, like
Got it.
demonstrating analysis.
Got it. So I will have another, just like today I had a 10-15 minutes of session, I will have another discussion on professional skill itself, okay? Because it requires a focused 15-20 minutes of discussion on this part on itself. But to answer you, the analysis skill is something to showcase that you can see through the scenario. You are not just reading, but you are able to find out the loopholes, the strengths, and the weakness in the argument. You can see through some of the insights, right? So that is called analysis. So if you are given, suppose, a 2-pager, okay, imagine you are given a 2-pager for Indian Airlines industry, right? And we are talking about the entire 5-6 different airlines, okay? But if you are good in analysis, what will you be able to do? You will find out that, look, like 3 companies who are doing very well, they are actually pricing their pricing their tickets very strategically, and they are utilizing data science to price the airline seats in a way that maximum seats can be sold. But those which are failing, probably they are not using the technology properly to price the seat. Because of that, their seats are not sold optimally, right? You're following me? So
Yes, sir.
looking at the same data, same scenario, if you come up with some of the very insightful topic, or you come up with a good suggestion, or you find out something very relevant using some model, that is called analysis. For example,
so basically investigating the information, breaking it down, and
yeah,
then suggesting an action.
yeah. So for example, let's see, here we have done a lot of analysis as well. What we have found out is that this guy is not delegating enough at the start, right? It is not written here that he's not delegating, but we have found out, right? We have also found out, you can mention that 10 years ago, Sully was successfully driving this company because he might have been the only employee of the organization. But after 10 years, he has to change the style because he has expanded. It is not written, but you can find out by analysis. You can mention that. You can also mention that as he grows in his role, as he becomes the CEO of large company, he need to delegate these roles for junior people, and he need to go into the strategic level of decisions, right?
Yes, sir.
You can mention this point. And what is this is called? This is analysis.
Yes.
Yeah. When you come up with this kind of fine points and the fine suggestions, which is not explicitly mentioned, that's called demonstrating your analysis and business acumen as well. So sometime you'll see examination writer, the examiner is also talking about, you need to show the business acumen, you need to show the practical understanding of the environment, business context. So coming up with these important points are called analysis, business acumen, professionalism, insightful, demonstrating insights, etc., etc. So we'll have 10 minutes of discussion systematically on how to showcase those skill sets as well, separately.
Okay, sir.
Alrighty. So syllabus link, entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. So this word needs no introduction nowadays. Entrepreneurship is when you start your own business using your skill set and products, basically. While many companies also promote intrapreneurship, well, whereby within the same organization, while you are staying, right? Sometimes you can come up with some new product, new kind of services you can sell to your clients, and then when the client agrees that, yeah, one of your employee has suggested and we want to continue with this discussion, what is your fees basically, and you are successfully able to sell a new product or service on behalf of your organization to your clients, that is an example of intrapreneurship, because you have behaved like an entrepreneur while still being an employee of your organization. Quite exciting, isn't it? So that is intrapreneurship. Social entrepreneur is applying similar principle in addressing social problems. Now you can apply the concept of so try to handle the way how this paper works. You understood entrepreneurship and you understood intrapreneurship. Now you can add word called social before the entrepreneurship, or maybe you can add technological entrepreneurship, and it can just mean a different type of enterprises. No need to memorize, no need to really worry about that what could be the social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship could be that maybe you want to open a business whereby you want to help people getting rid of intoxication or alcoholism, right? That is social entrepreneurship. Technological entrepreneurship, when you want to start a business, something similar to Facebook, but it is India specific, that is technological entrepreneurship. So on and forth, you can just change the prefix and a new meaning or the new definition will be created. Next, strategy. Again, Johnson et al. So the strategy is long-term direction of an organization, quite simple, and a small definition, still very to the point. So when any organization set their long-term vision and the direction, that is strategy. So that is also called strategic direction. So here we are talking about horizon 1, 2, and 3. Okay, when it comes to long term. Horizon 1 means defending and extending the current business. 2 are emerging activity that should provide new source of profit, and 3 are horizon 3 are new risk and might provide returns in several years of time. How could you define horizon 1, 2, and 3 in other way? If you were to write the book on strategy and you wanted to rephrase the way horizon 1, 2, and 3 is defined, how would you define this? Challenge yourself in a new way to form the theories. It can be useful way to handle the SBL papers. Sorry, I actually moved from this page. I'll share the book. So here I am at strategy. Okay. So on the strategy part, you'll see strategy is a long-term direction of an organization. Long-term is something at least 3 to 5 years in the future. Now we say horizon 1, horizon 2, and horizon 3. 1 means defending and extending the current business. 2 is emerging activities. And 3rd is venturing into new and risky business, which can provide returns in several years of time. How could you rephrase, or how can you define horizon 1, 2, and 3 in a different manner? Can you? It can be defined in of different way.
Organic growth. Then we have acquisition, and final one I could say long term.
Yeah, generally it is organic or inorganic. So once you have 2 types, then hard to have the 3rd one, because any growth can be either organic or inorganic. One way I was thinking that we can also say that Horizon 1 means defending and extending the current business. And if we were to expand it and apply in a business context, basically, you will find out some case studies which relate to this. What Horizon 1 means is defending and extending the current business. So this is a defensive strategy, isn't it? This is in nature quite defensive, that you want to first protect the business, and it is protective and defensive strategy. Horizon 1. Horizon 2 is more proactive. So businesses are emerging activity that should provide new source of profit. So here you are more proactive to get new source of businesses, right? Horizon 3, in some of the case study, we will clearly find out the symptom of Horizon 3, which is much more adventurous and innovative. Because the key difference between the second and third is that third is much more riskier, much more adventurous, and it might follow a blue ocean strategy. This kind of thing that we need to bring in the discussion for SBL paper, rather than using the what the textbook is only saying. Now, what is blue ocean strategy? Anyone? This is a very popular term, more recently popularized by various business thinkers and coined by Harvard Business School, a type of strategy making in the business whereby you don't have a competition. Blue ocean strategy means you are not competing for a pie of the business. You're not fighting on 10% or 12% or 15%. Rather, you want to maximize the profit by creating your own market. Okay. For example, imagine you are a textile manufacturing in a particular state, and there was such a vast and tough competition in the local market, and people were just reducing the price. There was a price war, there was a cost war, and there's so much you can reduce the cost, right? It is not infinitely possible. So what did you think is, you wanted to go online, and you develop your e-commerce platform, website, you talk to your logistics suppliers and the providers, and you started to supply the goods in other state as well online. So you have opened up a new market, probably. Of course, it might be existing already, but still you have opened new doors. Or you have started to supply your goods in some of the military setup or the factory where they need the products like you supply at a very low cost, and they can utilize this to repackage and make it luxurious products. So you have started to open new market for yourself where there is a less competition or no competition. So of course you are going into new and risky venture, but you are creating a new market for yourself. Generally, blue ocean strategy is considered when you have gone into or have created a new market for yourself where there is no competition at all. You are the king of your market. So that would be Horizon 3 ventures. So this kind of perspective would be required when you read through the case studies. We have talked through the strategic direction, the stakeholder. We know anybody who is impacted by the affairs and the business of your company, they are stakeholders. And boundaries are the limitations of any organization. The boundary could be the capital, the license, the regulatory limitations, trade barriers, whatever. Level of strategy. Strategy, as we discussed earlier in the form of the Anthony model, strategy are considered three-layered. One is corporate strategy. As we can understand from the picture itself, corporate strategy at the COO, CEO level, and when it is done at the national or global leadership level. Business level strategy, when we deal with the implementation, deviation, resourcefulness, and how to achieve the corporate strategy, is the business level strategy. So it is about how to compete successfully in particular market. The head of a business unit must decide where to be based, what product to sell, and where to source your ingredients, your suppliers, who will be the vendor, who will provide the logistics and supply chain. All those things will come under business level strategy, right? So that's what in the Anthony model it is called tactical, because corporate strategy is all about going into new market, expanding into new country or new geography, launching new product and services. But how to do that will be under business level strategy, and operational strategy will be about implementing the tactical or business level strategy at the state level, country level, or maybe at the local business level. How to run those things on day-to-day basis. That will be operational strategy. How to run the factory, how to how to build it at a low cost, etc. Mission statement. This is another thing quite famous almost in all the books. A mission statement should be a statement that can clearly communicate the vision of the organization. When it comes to vision, means why this organization exists. It should be that level of the statement. So this is a formal document that states the organization's mission, means why this organization was set up, why does it exist, what it wants to achieve, and it should reflect the core value and policy and standards of behavior, how to behave, how to work. Some of the real world example which is given is from Nike, Honda, and Disney to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete. Actually, in fact, more interesting one is Google's mission statement, which says to to bring all the world's knowledge in one place. That was the mission statement Google started with, to bring all the world's knowledge in one place, to make it more accessible to the entire world. That was the mission statement of the of Google. Similarly, we have from Nike, Honda, and Disney. Disney is a bit long. It should not be long, that long. Ideal one is like Honda, which should be very specific and still very clear. Clarity, specifics, and a vision. All 2-3 elements should be there in a mission statement. To maintain a global viewpoint, quite important word, global viewpoint, we are dedicated to supplying products of the highest quality, yet at a reasonable price for worldwide customer satisfaction. See, such a smart mission statement, saying the global market I want to capture. Quality should be of highest level, price should be reasonable. Okay, so based on this, we might be asked to comment on a mission statement or state if the mission statement is providing the right message. Ashbridge College model of mission. So there is Ashbridge College model as well to talk about how the mission statement should be formed. And the mission statement, so as we said, it should have value, purpose, policy, and strategy. So it should have these 4 components to check. And if we think that any mission statement is missing, we can highlight. This should be a good checklist. It is created by Campbell and Young in 1991. Let's start with the strategy. It provides the commercial logic for the company and so addresses the following question: what is our business and what should it be doing? Value means ethics and principles and the culture. Purpose in the long term, what it wants to do in the long term. To create the wealth or to create the knowledge or to change the world. What is the purpose of the organization? So one value is about the ethics, etc. So one part could be what happened to this. So value are the belief and moral principle that underlie the organization's culture. So it is about ethics. Strategy we talked about. Purpose, what it wants to do in the long term to create just the wealth or the knowledge or to mitigate poverty or eliminate the hunger. If the purpose is defined for, say, an NGO or health related organizations like a hospital, they will say something like, to eliminate infectious disease from the world. If you read the mission statement of something like Red Cross. Or finally, the fourth aspect, which are little difficult to recognize straight away, policy and standards of behaviors. This could be the mix of values and purpose. So provides guidance on how the organization's business should be conducted. For example, a service company that wishes to be the best in its market. Okay, so best in the market. So something like what Honda said earlier, in a reasonable price for worldwide customer satisfaction. So reasonable price. This is reflecting your modus operandi, how you want to operate. You want to become global and you want to supply your product globally, but how you want to do that, achieve that? So at a reasonable price. So that is example of policies and standards of behavior. So a standard of behavior is that we want to be reasonable in terms of pricing. We don't want to milk people. Of course, just like any other model, it will have its own limitations, but we can just remember that Ashbridge College model has four aspects: strategy, value, purpose, and policies. And I'm also sure that you will be creating your own some acronyms, right? Strategy, value, purpose, policy. So something like SVPP. So start to create some acronym for your note, and that will help in revising as well. And as we expect, this mission statement communicate the value and purpose. So it is good for clarifying why we exist for public relation. It will also give a message for generalization, that what is our value, and it will go on for generations. Like companies like General Motors and many such big companies, they exist for a few generations. And once the mission statement is set in tone, the same culture and the story and ethics will continue forever. So they are very important part of any organization. Mission statement is followed by objective. And why and how it works is, suppose a mission statement like maintaining a global viewpoint of Honda, we are dedicated to supply a product of highest quality. So this can be broken down in multiple objectives, right? So generally objective could be like, okay, we need to have logistic and supplier in maybe 25 big markets, right? What can we make out from this mission statement of Honda? We want to have supplier in 25 big markets. We need to have different structure and models of the cars. And we also need to have one of the lowest price in each market. That could be the viewpoint for, that could be the objective for Honda like companies. So one mission statement can have multiple objectives, as we can see here, maintaining global viewpoint, and we also will be equipped with the global changes. Whatever the changes coming in the global landscape, we will be on the top of this. So if Tesla is bringing the electric car and some advanced technology, we will be also bringing that. We will also compete with Tesla on the price, and we'll also have all the latest models. We'll also build low carbon emission cars. We'll also bring fuel efficient cars, and we'll also bring the electric ones. So the mission statement of Honda can be broken down in very easily 8 to 10 different objectives. Can't we, right? So that's what it is saying here. Mission needs to be supported by more detailed objective, and then how it can be done, that will come in picture as well. So a simple model of relationship between the various goals, objective, and target is a pyramid analogous to the traditional organizational hierarchy. So for some reason, humans have the tendency to love pyramids, be it the Giza or Egypt, but we always try to put everything under the pyramid. What it's doing here is overall mission, we set the mission, and each of the high level goal is supported to turn by more detailed subordinate goals, and we try to break down mission into the goals and objective. That is the second category of the pyramid. And in the bottom we find out targets. We all are familiar with the targets, right? Suppose your organization says that we want to have by end of say December 2021, we want to have artificial intelligence credit score model for the banks. That will be the mission. That will be the goal for the year, because mission will be fixed. This will not change frequently. Once mission is made, it remains the same for 10 to 25 years. So based on the mission, we want to be technologically driven, innovative company. Okay. So technologically driven, innovative company. So let me just focus. So let me just share a PPT to write this better. Mission statement on the top. Let's make a pyramid. So this is mission statement. Here I have broken down the mission statement for 2021. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different goals. Okay, these are the goals for 2021. Are you still with me? So goal number 5, one of the goals said, right, build AI based credit score model by maybe September 2021. Are you still with me? Then this goal, and there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different goals like this, not only one. And then it will be transferred to operational staff to achieve. That is how this pyramid works, the one that we saw in the textbook. This operational staff will try to find out resource, time, planning, skills to achieve all the goals which has been set up here in the middle. So mission statement can be broken down in the goals and objective for every year or maybe every month. And operationally, it needs to be handled and achieved. So that's why one mission will have multiple goals and objective, and every goal and objective will have various targets, ETA, stats, because only with the statistics and the target timeline, you can prove that you have achieved the goal, right? Otherwise, it is called that it is just a wish list. If a goal do not have ETA and target, it is considered to be a wish list. So the data, target, and ETA is the fundamental of the bottom in order to achieve this. Now, while we are setting all this, actually leave the mission statement. When we are setting the goals and the target, we need to follow something called SMART goal making process. The process of goal setting should be smart, and where it should be aligned. It should be aligned at let me find some color, maybe this level, here and here, the place where you set the goals. At the second and the third level, you need to set the goal which must be smart. And what is the Meaning of this acronym: SMART, specific, measurable, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. So that has to be sensible goals, sensible objective, which should be flowing from mission statement to the goal setting and then target setting. So that is the aim of setting up the mission statement for the organization, which will help all of us stay aligned. And then this model will also help the entire business department functions to stay aligned to the mission and the goal of the organization. Okay, so that's what we have just discussed. And next we'll come to strategic value and CSR. In fact, we'll be starting the corporate governance next. Very important topic: corporate governance, strategic management. So these are all the foundational theories for next few chapters, but good to understand the definition and the context. Any questions so far before we close?
No, sir.
All right, fantastic. So we'll see you in the class day after tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
All righty, thank you so much. And let me know if any question, any doubt. We'll discuss that one, and we'll continue to just attempt more and more case studies, questions, etc. That's the best way to master this subject. All right, cool. Take care and thank you.